it's the beauty of modern technologies. We can bring people from Mykolaiv and from Kyiv to Davos like this. But I think we have Minister Kubrakov on now. You're in the middle of fighting a hot conflict, and I assume that has to consume so much attention of the government. But how are you approaching the issue of reconstruction, especially as you're taking back territory, and what resources do you have or need to do that?
Hello, everybody. Again, thank you very much for your question. I try to explain where on what we are focusing at this moment, at this stage of this war, and but I would start from just several important figures. Probably you know that there is estimation of World Bank, which they did in the middle of previous year. They calculated direct losses from this war about $100 billion US dollars, and whole losses about 350 billion US dollars. It was general losses, but it was in the middle of previous year. And World Bank with United Nations team, they will start a new estimation, new wave of estimation, I think at the beginning of this year, probably even in January. And so we will come up with the team of World Bank with new figures, with new reports. At this stage, for us, first priority, this is energy sector. So we understand that without energy, without electricity, we won't have heating, we won't have water supply. And this is the most critical, and we are focusing all our efforts to protect these objects, electricity substations, to recover, to rebuild, to install new equipment as soon as possible. This is priority number one. But how we see recovery in several months. So I think with all efforts, with our key allies, with I hope that air defense system which already announced, we will receive as it promised. I think all auto transformers which we already ordered in cooperation with our allies, with our partners, I think we will receive also very soon. And I think in the middle of this year, so we will be ready. So we can say that our objects, our substations will be. First of all, we can relaunch our course. To be honest, I understand that it won't be a large scale, but we can understand that at least such sectors which worked before October 2022, when Russians start destroying our energy sector, I think these sectors, they can start again. And it will be very important sign for people, I wouldn't say to come back, but to Ukraine, but I think it will provide some more confidence in our future. So it's first. But regarding recovery, how it's work, on what we are focusing. In 2022, in the occupied regions, our three services under our supervision, they appeared in these regions immediately right after army. First, the port workers, they restored the main bridges. They tried to construct temporary bypasses, temporary bridges, temporary roads. The same, our Ukrainian Railways company, they did a great job. We were able to launch Kyiv-Kherson train in 1 week after the occupation of Kherson. And it was similar approach we had in Kharkiv region as well. And Ukrainian Postal Service. Immediately we started providing social payments, pensions to our people on the occupied territories. It was first. If you're talking about just more serious things, again, during this year, we will focus only on the most critical objects in each sphere, in transportation sphere. If you're talking about social objects, understand that we won't have possibility to recover, to rebuild everything. But at least we need in some small cities, small towns, at least one hospital which can work and provide services. Similar with schools, similar with kindergartens, only the most critical things. And I believe that in this way people will start coming back to the cities. But in parallel, what is critical, it's again start relaunch local economy. Because, for example, I visited Mykolaiv last week, and I see, so we can. I'm almost sure that we were able, with our allies, with partners, with IFIs, to rebuild the most critical in Mykolaiv during this week, during this year. Sorry, last week I visited. But again, the most critical things, it's like working places. I understand there are a lot of state-owned companies. I understand that there is private sector, and it's like complex approach we use here, because otherwise, it's everything related. People won't come back in case if they won't have where to work, and private sector and business, they won't launch their companies production without people. So I here just the most critical, I think, from our side, just to balance these two components. In parallel, we will start development of detailed and complex plans of territories. Why it's important? Because again, we need to rethink all these deoccupied territories and to do it in a very fast way, just because to understand how many hospitals we need, how many schools. In case of something destroyed totally, probably we don't need to rebuild the same. For sure, we need to build better and to be more efficient, to be more energy efficient, and this is critical. But again, in each region, without these detailed plans, we will have objects which we need anyway, and we need it as soon as possible. Mostly, I think all these projects will be realized with IFIs, like we did actually in transport sector. I think we had a very good example of cooperation with World Bank, with EBRD, with European Investment Bank. We synchronized all our projects and activities, I think, in third quarter of previous year. We already started several projects last year, and I think we will have more projects this year. In each direction, we have partner. We are not competing with each other, and for these projects, we are working closely, and we have steering committee almost each month, and we coordinate all our affairs in the same actually energy sector. Everybody understand who is doing what and which organization in charge of what. And similar approach I think we will have with social objects, with local administrations, with regional administrations. We will continue working in this way. Thank you very much.
What do you see, how long would it take to get the energy infrastructure back to what it was before the October 22 and missile attacks? And what is the time frame for the other things you mentioned in terms of transport and schools? You've obviously, you do have a number in mind, but I wonder if you can give people a sense of the scale of the destruction and how long it would actually take to rebuild.
If you're talking about energy sector, I think almost 50% of energy objects somehow, partially or totally, were destroyed during this war. I think it will take more than 1 year. It will take 2-3 years in order just to come back to the previous situation. But what is critical to restore, to rebuild the most critical electricity substations, the most critical power generation stations. So just in order to provide reliable services to private sector and first of all, for sure, to our people. I think we were able to do this in case of air defense protection. In case of all our efforts, will be successful this year. If you're talking about social infrastructure, transport infrastructure, I think regarding transport infrastructure, we were able to rebuild the most critical bridges, the most critical railway bridges during last year on the occupied territories. But for sure, still there are some projects which we have to do. Because to be honest, we realized most part of all these projects with temporary solutions. And we cannot use them for years. We can use it 1 year, 1 season, but anyway, we need normal bridges, not just temporary bridges, which are, to be honest, not so reliable for many years. With social objects and with all other things, I think the most critical sites we are planning to do this year.
You are now running something called the Reckoning Project. You are leading the founder of the Public Interest Journalism Lab, and you spend a lot of time on the front lines in the field. And I wonder, share some impressions that you have from there.
But to give the impression, as the panel is about also liberated territories, previously we asked a lot about the occupation, I probably would like to stress how much and how awaited the liberation was and is. So shortly to explain, within the Reckoning Project we have dozens of journalists traveling around the country and documenting war crimes, but also when we've been working a lot in Kherson region, Mykolaiv region, prior to the liberation, Kharkiv region, and it's already at this stage quite clear to explain what Russians are doing before we go in for the court. So before going to the liberation, I should say that for a while a lot of analysts trying to explain, that the Russians' actions are chaotic, but the impunity is the way how the Russians operate. It's just like if there is no one order and one way of making the atrocities in Kharkiv and Kherson, it doesn't matter there is no tool book or there is no high command. And but the story I would like to share, which is rarely because there are so many, the exhibition shows how many people has been killed, how much people had been tortured. What we also look at that one of the Russian strategies is really to, let's say, to behead the communities and subdue the population. And it's not always the mayor. For instance, in Kherson region, we've been operating for, all the time because some of our reporters are from occupied Kherson. Out of 49 territorial communities, almost all leaders had been at some point either detained or abducted or tortured, which means that what is the difference of what I think in the West was not still understood, that if in Crimea and in the Donbass the attacks were on kind of activist journalists, independent thinkers, not being loyal to Russian occupation is enough to be detained. It's enough to be tortured. And that means that, that everybody is under the risk. And any independent thinker, any person who can spread the bread for the communities. So what we also saw that, there are this discussion about genocide and attempt of the genocide, but the idea that to behead the communities, to attack the particular type of the local leaders, it's something which had been done. And moreover, contrary to what I've seen for years reporting in the Donbass and Crimea, the Russians were really not very much capable to provide anything else. For instance, to run the school, no, they need people to show the picture for the Russian television that as if the schools are opening. To show the picture as if they are providing medical help, but not really running the hospital. So for quite a long period of time, these territories were not really maintained properly, and the longer occupation is there, despite of the horrific war crimes and possibly already crimes against humanity which were committed on these territories, and we have evidence of that. Now one of the challenge after the liberation is really how to run them back, because many heads of the villages, either they've been detained at some point, so they've been taken out, or they needed to leave. And now in order to recover, and that's probably where I think that the minister would speak about. You really need to have an immense operation in order to, bring back the life to the cities, because even if there is a policeman and law enforcement, he won't say, how many houses has been destroyed, how many people are left to receive the help. So that would be a huge challenge. But I think it's also proved that despite, the community survived, the damage has been bigger. But final note, again, like reporting the liberation, I was still amazed to be known that the resilience of the communities was very strong, that the support for the Ukrainian military coming is strong and remaining extremely strong in the left bank of the, Dnipro River, currently occupied Kherson regions, and that is also important. But to leave with a small anecdote, just if you ask about the frontline impressions, there are people who would tell more, and who live in Kherson and come here from the, areas which suffered. What was striking that despite what we hear in the news, I've been doing one of the documentaries in the hospital, which was under occupation in Mykolaiv region and town of Snihurivka. And after we came already, of course, everything we heard before was confirmed. So I have a huge trust to the people under occupation. Everything they told when it was still occupation, we figure out it's even worse. They are not overdoing. But then we had the video clips of the local workers in the lab, in the hospital, who on the Independence Day, despite of the presence of the Russian troops, were secretly filming this video that, with the Ukrainian flags, reporting to their authorities, their doctors who are in the government-controlled territory, to say that we were able to do 3,000 lab tests for our people. We were able to treat 5,000 people. They did it not for showing off. They did it to send it, just for the people to know that in the occupation, they go on to, stay with their communities, stay with their people. They remain Ukrainians. They have huge risks, but they are really staying there. So for me, the main message would be still to understand that it's not an issue of the discussion whether the rest of the country should be liberated. It's something people genuinely believe, genuinely want, and the more time the occupation happens, the bigger is damage. So the fast liberation is really in the interest for the people staying there, in the interest of recovery as well.
If I want to turn to you, Archbishop Gumenyuk, from Philadelphia, but also the president of the Ukrainian Catholic University, and I wonder. You're in touch with Ukraine's very active diaspora, and obviously, the whole world has mobilized to try and aid Ukraine. But there is talk more recently about fatigue. It's going to be a year next month since this war started. Tell me, are you sensing any fatigue in your conversations in the West about what it will take to continue to support Ukraine, and also how would you gauge the support for doing the kind of work that the minister mentioned in terms of rebuilding?
The events of February last year, the escalation of the war sparked an incredible, rather global solidarity that I think probably the world has never witnessed. It's hard to keep up that tension of enthusiasm, and yet I would say the underlying convictions remain. The clarity of the Ukrainian cause and the desire of good people to help, I think, is still there. And certain decisions by the U.S. government in the last weeks, certain budget decisions have reflect that. I think it's very important to explain that this is a long-term challenge. If we step back and look at occupation and deoccupation, international humanitarian law mandates, guarantees, governs how occupiers are supposed to behave on that territory. Food, medicine, clothing, shelter is supposed to be guaranteed. Even everything needed for religious purposes. People are not supposed to be deported. They're not supposed to be taken to work for the military, and under no circumstances are they supposed to be drafted into the occupiers' forces. All of these provisions have been violated profoundly, and there is torture, there are desaparecidos, people who have disappeared, activists who have been arrested, and many people have been killed. The long-term consequences of this are still to be measured. We speak a lot about the infrastructure. You asked the minister, how long will it take to get the energy going? There was talk about hospitals, schools, but territories are liberated to liberate people. That is the most important question. How can the people recover? And the trauma that is instituted by such devastating behavior is very deep. I'm the son of people who lived under Soviet occupation between 1939 and 1941, and under Nazi occupation. My parents were refugees for 5 years. And it is possible to rebuild. They came from a Ukraine in which the inhabitants of Ukraine, 7 million inhabitants of Ukraine were killed during World War II. You can recover. But you need something like the Marshall Plan. Germany, it took 2 generations for Germany to really get back on its feet. It's taken a generation for East and West Germany to come together. And we can see in the United States, it's taken 150 years, and the job still isn't finished, to recover from the injustices of the time of the Civil War. So we can't allow for fatigue. It will come, but we need to respond to it in creative ways, explaining what is really happening. What is the human heart? I don't know if you remember when Putin demonstrated in maybe not explicitly violent way his contempt for others when he brought in a dog into a meeting with Angela Merkel. And the reaction of a Grand Chancellor, one of the most powerful people in the world, was one of fright. Why? Because probably she was bitten by a dog once in her life. It doesn't take much, one dog bite, to have a lifelong reflex. What kind of reflex do you have after months of torture? Political prisoners explain what it is like to go hungry if they went on hunger strikes. My friend Miroslav Marinovich tells me, everybody in Ukraine knows and respects him, a strong person, a person of great discipline. But he has a reflex when he misses a few meals because of what happened in the past. So besides the financial, all the dollars, all the engineering, all of the logistics that need to be considered and planned, there needs to be great attention to the human soul. There needs to be great love. There needs to be great patience. Ola and I work with handicapped people. And we found that in the Ukrainian Catholic University, the presence of our handicapped friends helps people deal with their problems. Because one of the issues after trauma, after totalitarianism, after occupation is a lack of trust. Trust needs to be rebuilt. And people who are poor and who are non-threatening help us renew our trust. I think it's very important, and I want to thank all the organizers, all you here present and all the audience, that the world is looking carefully at what is going on, at this occupation, at this devastation. The world needs to do a little more than look. the engagement, the help needs to be more immediate. It needs to be more massive, because Ukraine is the epicenter of global change. And it needs to be the epicenter not only of technical, diplomatic, political, agricultural, energy change, but it needs to be a place of anthropological change. And I think it is that deep human response of Ukrainians to this challenge, this David standing up to Goliath, that is attracting the attention of the world. Now that attention needs to be focused, it needs to be refined, it needs to be educated, it needs to be given kind of a strategy, a real vision, a mission.
Thank you. Very powerful words, thanks. We have Governor Vitali Kim online. There you are, okay, super. Governor, it's very good to have you. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you okay. Hello, everybody.
Maybe we can just start. Can you give us a sort of update on the situation in Mykolaiv?
Okay. Якою мовою? In what language?
You choose. You choose.
I will choose Ukrainian language and try to say everything that is actual on this day. Всім доброго дня.
Good afternoon. It is my honor to be invited to speak in front of you. You know that 9 months Mykolaiv Oblast was a pre-border, the pre-front zone, and we were standing against Russian army, and our soldiers have proven that we're going to liberate all of our territories. We have liberated majority of the Mykolaiv Oblast, and we're not going to stop. Yesterday night, Russian Federation shelled the city of Charkiv. They hit the art school, and one person died, the person who was in charge of a boiler house. So we're losing children, we're using people on the daily basis, and I want you to demonstrate to you what Russian world is about. Please, could you show the video?
Military commander of the region. How would you assess the sort of tactical more state of the conflict? Is there any even territory down in the south which is vulnerable, as we're seeing a little bit in the east right now? I assume the answer is probably not. And if so, do you expect that you can go on the offensive, and what you would need to be able to go on the offensive in the south?
Okay, I can't hear the translation, so I'll try to answer you in English. For now, we have 48 villages that was deoccupied on 11th of November. For now, under occupation in Mykolaiv region is still 3 villages on Kimburska Kosa. And for now, battle line is on the Dnieper River. So they occupied all the right bank of the Dnieper River. And Russian Federation for now shoots and shell every day the city of Kherson and the Kherson region because they just can do this. Every day people are dying in there. Talking about our needs, first of all, talking about military situation. First of all, we need weapons and ammunition to deoccupy our territories. It is a very complicated question, and I think you need to talk about this with our military forces. Talking about civilian life and recovery of our region, our country, we have for now more than in our region, just only in Mykolaiv region, we have more than 8,000 damaged objects. And from the 24th of February, 483 people, civilian people they was killed by Russian Federation. And 12 children are among them, for a big pity. And I'm talking with you from the occupied city Snugurivka. We just opened the bridge, temporary bridge that was made by military forces, and it was made less than for a month, from the 20th of December. So, and we have such 6 bridges just only in our region, and we need help to recover our country and economy, first of all, because big business was relocated or destroyed, and it will take a time to recover our economy in our region. And people are coming back to Mykolaiv region, about 100,000 people came back to Mykolaiv region, but they do not have job places. They just don't have job places that they can have money for their life. So the main problem is recovering our infrastructure, our economy, and creating new job places, because we need to live further. Everybody needs to eat something. So main problems for now.
Super. One last quick question before we go to a video from that you've also shared with us is: are you advising residents of Kherson who left to come back, or are you still thinking that you need to wait to have the city repopulated? Not just considering that it's under attack, but also because obviously a lot of the infrastructure is so badly damaged.
You know, to tell the truth, I can talk only. I have the right to talk. The question was, you should come back if you can help our military forces and do something good for our victory. Everybody needs to work for our victory. Talking about Kherson region, it is very dangerous now, because Russian Federation left thousands of mines. Every day somebody's get killed stepping on the mine, and they are everywhere, in fields, in infrastructure objects, in civilian houses. So it's truly dangerous for now, because the mining process is going now.
I think we're going to watch a brief video that you have sent in, please.
I do not know whether you can hear me, but I will comment. Until November 11th, we were under constant shelling. Out of 80 days, we were not shelled only 30 days. 48 of our settlements went under occupation. And 483 civilians died in the region, including 12 children. More than 8,000 objects were destroyed or damaged. And houses is about, private resident buildings is about 6,000, and medical institution about 123, 123, educational infrastructure 100, institutional 130, religious building 48 damaged, administrative building 54, agricultural facilities 12, the biggest 12 enterprises was fully destroyed. Civil infrastructure 73 objects were damaged or destroyed. Life support facilities, gas more than 1,100, electricity about 1,000, water supply 31. Only 5,400 consumers are without gas supply as a result of hostilities. Electricity, water supply, and sewage are cut off in 50 settlements. This is 8,000 families. So this is in general problems and what we have now, for now, in Mykolaiv region.
Thank you so much, Governor. That was very revealing. I want to maybe turn now to Olga Tsilenko and her son Nazar, who before the war and were living in Kherson, and you worked at the head of the NGO Sophia, and you worked with the Ukrainian army with disabilities and people with disabilities in your city. And Nazar, you were a teenager. You were in Kherson during the after February 24th, and you decided to stay. And during these months of occupation, you've delivered humanitarian help worth over 1 million hryvnia. You faced persecution and death threats, and lived in constant fear before the Ukrainian army liberated Kherson. It is really, I think, good to have you both of you with us. Maybe you can just start by, maybe you can sort of describe for us what is Kherson now? What is it like to be there now?
Thank you for the invitation, and thank you for allowing us to be the voice of Kherson. I even thought that Kherson is like capital city of Ukraine right now, and thank you for speaking about souls, not only economy. Kherson is destroyed now. There's much less people. There's 1/3 or 1/4 of population left in the city of Kherson. The fourth time the pediatric hospital was hit by shelling. But Kherson is still standing. The 25 families still stayed, although 26 left, and the families that I took care of. But the feeling that you live with is the feeling of fear, and not from shelling to shelling, but permanent fear. As I said, there's nothing more horrific in the war than Russian boots on the soil when you live with them in the same city, because you have no rights at all. There's no rights then. You have no guarantees that you're going to come out and then you're going to come back. You can't tell anything to anyone. You don't have the right for your own self. You don't have the right to look, to say, to raise the eyebrows, and not to look into the eyes. That it means you will have a search right there on the street. And so no rights and constant fear. And the left bank is my pain right now. The left bank, which is occupied, and people are being tortured even more because they don't accept Russian power and Russians. We have shown the resistance even on the level of the small children. During the occupation, only twice we brought our children together, and the first time was on the 1st of June, on the Children Protection Day. We found a place where we could have a small celebration, and we handed out the colored chalk, and we told them to draw whatever they want on the pavement. And I preserved those pictures. All pictures were about Ukraine. All the drawings were in blue and yellow. And we were afraid later on for the troop to come and patrol to come, and the teenagers were trying to stand and warn for the approaching patrol. We also in October we brought the children in a cafe, and we recorded the address to those children who have led Kherson, and our children who intellectually could still speak, and they all were saying, we're looking forward to you coming back to the liberated Kherson. So at the same time, parents were very careful with their children, because children, it slips from children's mouth what they think very easily. So, and usually the children are the one who can who tell what they think, and that was dangerous. And but children were talking nevertheless only about these things. So we were trying to protect our Ukrainian identity, but the most horrific things of everything that happens are the completely demolished villages. And why villages in particular? The specific feature of the south of Ukraine is that village is this base structure which protects the Ukrainian culture. Ukrainian culture is being destroyed in the south of Ukraine. This is going to be a titanic effort to restore what has been destroyed, because you couldn't speak Ukrainian, you couldn't even wear blue and yellow clothes. The culture, the libraries were destroyed. For example, my dress, the Russian soldier was kind of cleaning his boots with my Ukrainian embroidery dress. So it was destroyed in a very straightforward manner and audacity. And we understand that this conflict is here for good, but we want to shorten this time as much as possible, because this will be unrestorable loss. So we had Polish people come and visit us, and we also had some people coming from Bratislava with humanitarian aid, and their first words were that we understand what it's like, because if Ukraine will not stand, we're going to be the next ones. And we want to share this message to the rest of the world, that this is not just a joke. This is not just populism, and this will not simply stop if you don't defeat it. This is the force where there is no empathy, there is no civilization. They were taking the phones, ordinary phones, and then it said, "Could you show me where your Android or smartphone is, because I need to see your pictures." This is the horde which demolishes everything on their way, and we would like to appeal and ask you to make sure that this is stopped as soon as possible, because this is really very scary, and that breaks people very much. I see this from myself, from the example of my children. This destroys the psychology very much, and the psychic damage can be huge. And Olga was asking to get the assistance in creating rehabilitation centers for the people who have suffered, because it's not being treated. It doesn't treat itself naturally. You need to put a lot of efforts. I don't know whether we need to talk about the conditions when we live there. You couldn't get the humanitarian aid from the Ukraine-controlled territories. We had to collect these donations pennies by pennies, and we were grateful to the priests who took up this role of volunteers. We were purchasing the food to feed the families, because there was. If I tell you there was nothing to eat, it is true, because my mothers were saying, "Olha Antonio, thank you very much," because otherwise we wouldn't have survived. And that's just physical feelings, and more in terms of moral damage. It's difficult even to describe. And we are the foremost of this. We're forefront. We are not victims. Just like in the Second World War, Poland was not a victim. It became the front line for the rest of the world. And we want you to understand this. We are not just a simple victim, and we're not bringing this ourselves as an offering. When we were going out to different rallies, when the occupation of Kherson started, you saw how we behaved in this rally, and the world didn't expect this to happen. It's just happened geographically that we are here, and historically that we are where we are, and that it just happened so they cannot accept us as we are, and that they cannot forgive us for who we are, forgive us for our civilization, for the path that we have chosen, for the path towards you, towards Europe, towards the West, and that's what we want the protection for. And then thank you very much, and I welcome you to come whenever you can visit. We have very hospitable people, and we will be hosting you very warmly, and we'll try to show you that all the efforts aimed at liberating Ukraine, and I'm speaking about the south of Ukraine, were not in vain. Thank you very much.
And Nazar, you talked about fear and just kind of there's this sort of time under occupation. And I wonder, how did you keep hope? And maybe Nazar, how did young people stay hopeful? Do you feel like you and your friends were even kind of closer during the occupation? How did you try and undermine the occupation?
For the most part, from the very beginning of the occupation, for the first 2 months, I would say, I stayed at home without knowing what to do. And my mum got 3 girls from the university, and my sister went for a walk together with them, and I followed them, I accompanied them, and it was the first time I left my flat. That was a turning point. Just during the occupation, the life changed dramatically. I lost some of the friends. I found some as well. And friends, young people became closer, as you say. They became more united. And they actually came to realize their nature of a human being. So I am going to finish the 9th grade, and I plan to go to a vocational school to train as a mechanic. And under the occupation, I gave more thought to my future plans, even though what we thought on a daily basis was what to do tomorrow. And when we were trying to get evacuated to Kiev, we were waiting for a driver to take us in his car. 4 or 3 mines or just mortar shells exploded right under our feet, and that was truly scary. Just my friend's house was damaged by a mortar shell, and we had no light for several days because, again, the mortar fire damaged the electricity line. Many had no telephone connection. Some had no water because water pipes were destroyed, etc. And it was very frightening when I was walking around my neighborhood. I would never actually dream of going downtown, but every time I would go out, I would be scared. And downtown, in the center of the city, in the office of the Red Cross Committee, Ukrainian Red Cross Committee, where my friend was, he told me about his suffering from the explosion of a shell. You might know the story of a woman who served in International Red Cross Committee, but when she went out, she got under shelling and she was killed. And it was my friend's aunt, actually. And when they were subject to another shelling, they decided to get evacuated because it was very unsafe, very dangerous to stay in Kherson. And when these quote-unquote liberators were just coming into the city, we never thought of leaving this city because my mom is in charge of the children and there would be nobody to take care of them. And my mother gave me some foodstuffs, and we, together with my friends, would go to the apartments where lonely elderly people lived, and we distributed those rations to them. So there is one old lady who is almost blind, and we had to provide her with staple foods. So there was a unity, but the entire situation under the occupation was dreadful. And we live in Kherson in a district where Ukrainian patrols walk, and you should not be there after 4 p.m. because the enemy, once it gets dark, they start actually firing their artillery at the district. So we had to get evacuated from that very place. And there was an explosion close to our house. Several neighboring houses were totally destroyed, razed to the ground. And I called my friend yesterday, and he told me that a telephone, presumably belonging to one of the occupiers, was found. And we found a deserted or abandoned vehicle of the Russians, and we found a telephone, so we then gave it to the police.
Let me ask our hosts here, because we are sort of on at time, but I know we have 3 other people who do want to speak out. How much time do we have, do you think?
Should I suggest 10 minutes?
Okay, super. Maybe, Sergei, I can start with you. I've known you for many years, activist, writer, and former member of parliament. You've been working very closely with the railways and also spent a lot of time on the front lines. What are you seeing there? I know you just came back actually a couple of days ago from the east, so.
Of course, these stories, it's horrible. I came to this panel from another panel downstairs, and our prominent Ukrainian volunteer, Tyra, said few words which touched me a lot. She said, the first what Russian troops making when they occupied the territory, they establish concentration camp on this territory. What Ukraine first does when we liberate territory, we start train to unite this deoccupied territory with Ukraine, to let people go from this territory to safe place and to let people come back to this territory. And the same happened with Kherson, as our minister, Deputy Prime Minister said in the beginning of this panel, that train to Kherson was re-established during 1 week after liberation. It's incredible, incredibly fast. I don't know the precedent in the world history. The same with Irpin. When it was liberated, we restored train transportation with Irpin in 26 days, including the restoring of bridge, which was blown during the occupation of this part of Kiev regions. And now a lot of infrastructure has to be restored. For instance, 70 train bridges destroyed, and only 20 of them in very fast terms was were restored by Ukrainian railway workers, which I believe is one of the most prominent people in our country now. We have 6,000 railway workers fighting. Unfortunately, 300 of them died on the front line, but thousands of train workers, railway workers restored infrastructure despite the shelling and despite all horrible situation on the front line. You mentioned I traveled last week to Vuhledar, a Ukrainian city, which is totally destroyed now just because this city on the way of Russian troops trying to occupy Donbas region. And situation is also horrible. There is no water, no electricity, no mobile or any telephone connection, no heating, and in this city still 600 Ukrainians living under 24/7 shelling. And there are a lot of examples in our country where we can face so horrible circumstances. So the call to the world is only the same we have in the beginning of the war. Now, after 11 months of the war, we have the same. Stand with Ukraine, provide us with weapons, with proper weapons which will let us to clean our territory from Russian aggressors. It means long-distance artillery, of course. It means tanks, it means fighter jets. And always we have some kind of delay. When we start to call for anti-aircraft system in April, only in November, December we get answer from our partners. So it always takes 6 months to fulfill our demand. So we call to make it much faster. We call to cut the corners of bureaucracy because unfortunately in Europe bureaucracy is very strong and we have to deal with this on a daily basis. We call for sanctions, real sanctions, and now so many examples how Russia avoid these sanctions loopholes through other countries, neighboring countries like Kazakhstan or Georgia, but also countries in Asia. And this has to be fixed as soon as possible. And also we very much appreciate financial support provided to Ukraine, but we need this support to be provided for quite a long period of time until we win this war. Again, thank you very much for keeping attention, and thank you, Matthew, for raising the Ukrainian issue in your political publisher house. We appreciate it a lot, and it's you one of the contributors of our future victory as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, Roman Hime and Yarema Melashuk, you are visual artists and filmmakers, so I want to give you the floor.
Thank you. Well, me and my friend Roman, we were filming Kherson, and you can see this footage downstairs on the first floor. And I would like to quote my fellow Ukrainian artist, Nikita Kadan. He mentioned that art needs distance. And it usually needs distance to somehow reflect on certain things. And this moment, we weren't able to have this distance. We came really close. Literally, we came to the border line between occupied and non-occupied territory. And you can see this landscape on the first floor when you enter the space. Also, we visited the local history museum and art museum in Kherson. And it was completely looted. More than 4,000 exponents, objects were stolen by Russian army, Russian soldiers. It was a special operation in white gloves, basically. And there was also one temporary exhibition, which was called Ancient Greeks and Barbarians. And it was about Scythian era, the objects from Scythian era, and objects of Greek period that were found in the Kherson region. But one can say that Russians act like barbarians, but I may agree in a certain way, but when we went to the torture rooms, we found the writings on the wall, and besides some slogans like pro-Russian slogans, there were also poetry by Mikhail Lermontov and Russian anthem written in the prison cells. Prisoners were forced to write it down and then learn by heart the great Russian poet like Lermontov. And how come that this greatness can be used as a torture. Basically, they were torturing people with the great Russian culture. And so that, I think, is not that barbaric, but more like profound and postmodern fascism in a certain way. That Russians basically want to assimilate Ukrainians by bringing their own culture, this 19th century great culture, to a modern and to modern Ukraine. And this is something that we should be aware, I think, that it's not only about some barbaric gestures, but also about something ridiculously profound.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, the last word I want to give to Christina Berdinsky, who's a freelance journalist from Ukraine.
Yeah, I will be very
covering
short.
on the front lines.
Yeah. Я скажу по-українськи.
I will speak in Ukrainian very briefly. I've been to various Ukrainian regions and close to the occupied territories, and give you an example from the town of Bucha. When we got there several days after the deoccupation, the first person I met and spoke to was Yuri of 50 years of age, and he said that he was twice brought to the shooting squad to be killed by the shooting squad just for fun. And it was mock shooting, of course. And I was stunned. When he saw my reaction, my response, he said, everything's okay, I'm alive. But I can tell you, a young boy whose body is lying in the cellar, and he was killed, and he doesn't have a nose because they actually cut his nose away from his face. They perhaps disfigured his face even after they killed him. So I was not sure that I was prepared to see this body of a young man with no nose, and I understood that I was not prepared, neither morally nor psychologically. Nobody can be prepared for these fallouts of the occupation. And when we deoccupy the territories, we will not forget. People will live with this trauma for years and years on end. People who lived under occupation, those who worked with the victims of the occupation, those who covered the situation in the media, etc. So we should not forget about those territories on the second day after deoccupation. Life goes on, but it is not that happy after the deoccupation. For example, Izium was deoccupied in September, but until now, the DNA tests are going on, and people don't know whether they would retrieve the bodies of their nearest and dearest, and whether they would ever be able to give them a dignified burial. And in 4 months, we have to continue going there and to write about it, to publish articles about it. And it is a true challenge for the Ukrainian and international media to keep Ukraine in focus, because as the father said, it is with us for a long time to come.
Slava Ukraini.